The Last Oath, a tale of courage and sacrifice. In the distant land of Eldarion, the kingdoms of men are fractured. The once mighty empire has fallen, leaving scattered realms vulnerable to the marauding hordes of the Shadowborn, a ruthless army led by the warlord Malakar the Unyielding. Amid the chaos, a lone warrior rises to defend what remains of hope. A young warrior, Kale, trains alone in the ruins of his village. He is haunted by memories of the past, his family slaughtered by the Shadowborn when he was a boy. Now, in his late 20s, Kale is a hardened fighter, but he carries the weight of survivor's guilt. In the fractured realm of Eldarion, the lone warrior Kale rises to combat the Shadowborn, an invading army threatening the city of Ashenhold. Facing betrayal and overwhelming odds, Kale's courageous stand inspires hope and underscores the values of sacrifice and resilience. I was just a boy when they came. I couldn't save them, but I swore an oath that day no one else would suffer as I did. Kale's solitude is interrupted when a wounded soldier stumbles into the village bearing dire news. Soldier, weakly. Malakar marches toward the city of Ashenhold. If it falls, Eldarion will burn. Kale tends to the soldier's wounds and resolves to journey to Ashenhold to warn the people and prepare for the coming siege. Kale arrives in Ashenhold, a crumbling fortress city. He meets Lady Elira, the city's ruler, who is struggling to rally her people. Elira is a fierce and pragmatic leader, but even she doubts their chances. In the fractured realm of Eldarion, the lone warrior Kale rises to combat the Shadowborn, an invading army threatening the city of Ashenhold. Facing betrayal and overwhelming odds, Kale's courageous stand inspires hope and underscores the values of sacrifice and resilience. You're just one man, Kale. What difference can you make against an army of thousands? In the fractured realm of Eldarion, the lone warrior Kale rises to combat the Shadowborn, an invading army threatening the city of Ashenhold. Facing betrayal and overwhelming odds, Kale's courageous stand inspires hope and underscores the values of sacrifice and resilience. I don't fight for glory or victory. I fight because it's right. Let me train your soldiers. Together, we can hold the line. Kale trains the city's defenders, forging them into a disciplined force. He also bonds with Elira, who begins to see him as more than just a warrior. The Shadowborn army arrives, their banners darkening the horizon. Malakar himself rides at the head of the horde, a towering figure clad in black armor. Malakar bellowing, "Surrender, and I may spare your lives. Resist, and Ashenhold will be ash by dawn." Kale stands atop the battlements, rallying the defenders. In the fractured realm of Eldarion, the lone warrior Kale rises to combat the Shadowborn, an invading army threatening the city of Ashenhold. Facing betrayal and overwhelming odds, Kale's courageous stand inspires hope and underscores the values of sacrifice and resilience. We will not yield. This is our home and we will fight for it. The Shadowborn launch their assault. The battle is brutal, with Kale leading the charge. Despite being outnumbered, the defenders hold the walls for days, inspired by Kale's courage. Amid the siege, Kale discovers that a traitor within the city has been feeding information to Malakar. The traitor, Lord Drennick, seeks to save himself by offering Ashenhold to the Shadowborn. In the fractured realm of Eldarion, the lone warrior Kale rises to combat the Shadowborn, an invading army threatening the city of Ashenhold. Facing betrayal and overwhelming odds, Kale's courageous stand inspires hope and underscores the values of sacrifice and resilience. You've doomed us all, Drennick. Why? In the fractured realm of Eldarion, the lone warrior Kale rises to combat the Shadowborn, an invading army threatening the city of Ashenhold. Facing betrayal and overwhelming odds, Kale's courageous stand inspires hope and underscores the values of sacrifice and resilience. Because there's no winning this fight, better to live under Malakar than die for a lost cause. Kale confronts Drennick in a tense duel. He defeats the traitor, but is wounded in the process. The city's defenses are weakened, and Malakar's forces breach the outer walls. With the Shadowborn pouring into the city, Kale and Elira lead the remaining defenders in a desperate last stand in the Citadel. Kale fights like a man possessed, cutting down dozens of enemies, but the odds are overwhelming. Elira to Kyle, "We can still escape. There's a hidden passage beneath the Citadel. Come with me." In the fractured realm of Eldarion, the lone warrior Kale rises to combat the Shadowborn, an invading army threatening the city of Ashenhold. Facing betrayal and overwhelming odds, Kale's courageous stand inspires hope and underscores the values of sacrifice and resilience. "No, someone has to stay and hold them off. Go, Elira, lead the survivors. You're their hope now." Kale and Elira share a brief, heartfelt moment before she reluctantly leaves with the remaining civilians. Kale turns to face the advancing Shadowborn, his sword gleaming in the firelight. Kale whispering, "For my family, for Ashenhold, for Eldarion." Kale fights valiantly, taking down wave after wave of enemies. He faces Malakar in a climactic duel. Though Kale fights with unmatched skill and determination, Malakar proves too powerful. Malakar, mocking, "You fought well, warrior, but in the end, all fall before me." Malakar delivers a fatal blow. Kale collapses, bloodied but defiant. As his vision fades, he sees the civilians escaping through the hidden passage. Kale, smiling faintly, "They're safe, that's all that matters." The camera pans over the ruins of Ashenhold, now silent. Elira and the survivors watch from a distant hill as smoke rises from the city. In the fractured realm of Eldarion, the lone warrior Kale rises to combat the Shadowborn, an invading army threatening the city of Ashenhold. Facing betrayal and overwhelming odds, Kale's courageous stand inspires hope and underscores the values of sacrifice and resilience. Kale gave his life so that we could live. His sacrifice bought us time to rebuild, to fight another day. He kept his oath until the very end. Years later, a statue of Kyle is erected in a rebuilt Eldarion, bearing the inscription, "He fought not for glory, but for what was right." The final shot shows Kale's sword planted in the ground where he fell, a lone flower blooming beside it. This story highlights the values of courage, sacrifice, and the enduring legacy of those who fight for others. The sad ending reinforces the idea that even in loss, there can be hope and inspiration for the future. Please subscribe